Are you happy now? I guess. She doesn't know, therefore she's not. They ask, are you happy? You say you are. They say you're not. They ask, why aren't you happy? Well, not why aren't you. They ask, what makes you happy? You say your life. They say that's a lie. They say, why aren't you happy? Because you're telling me I'm lying. They say, no, we're not. We're just stating facts. Facts from where? From the trees? Or from your subconscious that determines how I'm meant to be? Here's a reminder. I'm not a crowd, I'm a being. And you have a voice just like me. Your voice does not possess me like my voice does not possess yours. Therefore, say what you want, say what you need, because I'm not listening. Because it's for me to decide whom I want to be. Congratulations, now you're an expert on me. Now let me reverse this talk and ask you these questions to see how you feel. You will answer. I will disagree. You won't like it. Why should that bother me? They stare at me astounded. So I looked and asked them, now you tell me what it's like to be placed in the same crowd where you put me. Someone once asked me to define the word happy, and I said to be content and filled with smiles all the time. But then they asked what happiness meant to me. So I stood there, and I tried to jot down a list in my head of things that made me happy. But every time I thought of something, it would get contradicted by something negative. So I just stood there and said, I don't know. It's quite depressing, right? Then all of a sudden, someone said to be happy is to be yourself without being judged by your actions or what you do. I mean, I've heard the statement to be yourself, and what does that even mean? I mean, let's be fair. Any decision or action that we've done in the past, to some extent, has been influenced by something or someone. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with it. I just see it as a verification of doubts, just making sure you're not the only one who's done it or does it. So that's what I thought happiness was. Now I'll ask you, do any of you know what the word happiness means? Or let me rephrase that. Do any of you know the components of happiness? You see, if I asked you all as a group right now, you'd give me something very general, like love or money. But if I asked each and every one of you individually, you'd give me something more specific, like playing sports or hanging out with the family. You'd all give me different ones. Here's why. Because there is no definition to happiness. Because as cliche as it sounds, that definition comes from you. When I was drawing a star diagram of how I was going to approach this speech, when I looked back at my plan, it reminded me that you as an individual have the power and capability to choose what you want and don't want to hear. Now, I don't mean that you can get by in life doing what you want without considering the consequences, but just as you control what you do and don't say, you can't control what you see and hear from others, but for your own benefit. Okay. This is a quote from Professor Sean, and I really like it because he used happiness as an advantage. His main point was for once and for all of us to stop saying, I'll be happy when ... I mean, we're all guilty of this. We say, I'll be happy when this happens, I'll be happy when that happens. For example, someone might say, by the time I'm 30, I want to be happily married with kids. And when that doesn't happen, you become unhappy. Instead, why not focus on the present rather than dwelling on something in the future? Because we all know the future is uncertain. So why are you basing your happiness on something that's uncertain? In another context, I have a friend of mine, and he says that by the time he's 25, he wants to be a millionaire. Well, by all means, go for it. But your expectation will not equal reality unless you work hard to make that expectation become real. Now, I find this whole relationship conception probably the most irritable topic there is because it plays with your mind in a very unrealistic, delusional way. Because for some reason, the majority of us feel that our life is not that exciting anymore, or wish and wonder why it's not the way it should be in the movies. You know, from all the wishing, wanting, and imagining for those most picture-perfect moments to happen, I can probably say only a small thing of what you want might essentially happen. Now, I'm not saying that wishes don't come true, nor do the perfect moments don't happen at least once. In fact, they do take place, but it's just that some of us have high expectations and demands from certain things that when they don't fully execute the way we wanted, we just get disappointed. when actually the primary purpose of its happening has already taken place, but not what we had in mind. Predominantly, I consider all these fantasy impressions from the movies we've watched or the stories we've told. It's not on purpose that some of us contemplate this method, it's just from our pre-existing knowledge of how these storylines represent a situation, they make it seem that that's the only ideal way to handle a matter. Therefore, we automatically assume that that's how it should happen in our life as well, when sometimes we forget that our life isn't scripted and edited like theirs. Now, imagination. Now, there's nothing wrong with imagination, because without imagination, where would your thoughts be? It's like a form of art. It paints our creativity. Sometimes imagination can be used as a healing place, something from the real world, and sometimes it's a temporary escape from the harsh reality, which is beneficial at the moment. But sometimes imagination tends to be unreasonable as well, where we don't even want to consider the other sides of the situation. We don't even want to consider the negatives, but all we're thinking about is ourselves. I think you and I know where the problem starts. Thus, when reality strikes, it just brings you down. Another concept would be the fact of overthinking. Now, overthinking does not do anything. All it does is add needless issues to your problem. It probably even brings up questions that are not even related to it, which is probably for the worse. Now, I know I've made it sound like imagination and expectation is something atrocious to splendor your mind upon. It truthfully isn't, but what I'm trying to say is that once you start to think about it in a very unrealistic or unreasonable way, that is when your happiness level will be tampered. It's a known fact, but the world does not tune exclusively to your requirements. Life may be unfair, but it's there for you to learn. You live with what you like and what you don't like as well. For me, happiness came from moving out of my comfort zone, which was when I left home. I used the negative path to happiness, which involved me doing things that I try to avoid most of the time. And one of that involves me right now, standing on the stage and speaking to all of you, because I am petrified of audiences. But it's that overwhelming moment knowing that I've done it is what makes me happy. You see, my happiness came from experiencing more negative emotions, or at the very least when I stopped running away from them. Now, like I said, how happiness has an overall view to it, happiness can be temporary as well. And what one may love, others may hate, but it's about respecting other people's choices. A temporary sort of happiness to me is music. Being a music lover, tune addict, whatever you want to call it, I just believe music holds the absolute key to synchronization and recreation of the mind. There is something so treasured about that key that when unlocked, it allows your thoughts to go somewhere else too. Practically like a temporary drug, taking you into a realm where your qualms are set free. It's like meditation. Or you could even consider it to be like medication with the cure being a vibration in the background. Now, I know that sounded very poetic and cliche, but the point I was making is happiness is finding your music. Now, being a mentor back home, I used to listen to the various problems that people dealt with, and with those problems, there were 5 common problems. And with those 5 common problems, I used my personal life experiences and situations and came up with 5 common solutions. Firstly, comparing yourself. Stop comparing yourself to others. This would only make you more frustrated about yourself. Stop comparing yourself to your friends, because it'll pull you down the ladder. Let's take the common example of social media. Facebook, Instagram, and Snapchat stories. You see your friends and all these people putting pictures of themselves having a blast, like partying or traveling. There's nothing wrong with that. But it's when you start to look at these pictures on a regular basis, and rather than seeing them in a positive approach, you see them negatively, it's kind of easy to see how boring your life is. Because whilst you're there sitting there scrolling through your newsfeed, they're having all this fun. And it's quite an unfair comparison. Does their high points define our happiness? Do they portray us what our life should be or how we should be living it? No, they don't. Because we all lead different lives. So instead of focusing on what they have, focus on what you have and build up on it. Number 2, jealousy. Jealousy is poison. Try and avoid being jealous of your friends, even if it's something that they possess and you don't. Because you never know, they might be jealous of something you have as well. And as hard as it sounds, just accept yourself. And if there is a quality that they have that you want as well, then strive for it. Use them as a motivation to reach your goal. Don't see them as an icon that makes you insecure about yourself, because at the end of the day, they don't know that they're making you insecure. They're just using that quality and getting on with their life. It is you who are taking their quality and decreasing your self-worth. Third one, pondering over the most simplistic things. You know, for me, this was a challenge to get over because I always favored what other people thought about me. But then I asked myself, why am I evaluating me on someone else's perception? Who gave them right in determining or controlling the version I want to be? All of you people sitting here in the audience, you're all irreplaceable people. No one can substitute you, so just be the version you want to be. The fourth one is letting go, which I feel is probably the hardest concept for all of us to take, because sometimes we don't want that thing or person completely absent to us. And this actualization to the concept of being happy came from the people that entered and left my life. It was the realization that one day, in fact, people do come and go. We can never regulate the amount of people that enter our lives, because like ourselves, they have their own life, their own priorities, and their own requests. Therefore, the best thing you can do is make most of the time that is spent during the relationship. So when that time comes that not many people want, you can just kind of accept the idea of crossing paths and for the lessons learned from the relationship. As the saying goes, you're just strangers with memories. Another concept to letting go is the idea of accepting and forgetting. And basically, I really like the quote a lot because we have all faced one of life's tornadoes during our existence, either us being at fault or others being at cause. Therefore, the best thing you can do is just kind of accept what happened, because never put a burden on anyone, especially yourself, because you will never reach the conclusion that you want in order to get to the final stages that allow you to move on. Corresponding to our quote, I believe that that storm is there for a purpose. And it will be there until we learn to accept and understand why it's teaching us to forgive and forget, including all the mistakes that you learned, either created by you or generated by others. Now, this is going to sound slightly out of context, but let's pretend that the situations we've experienced as natural disasters around the world. Now, there are several natural disasters. The aftermath of these disasters are not attractive at all. In the process, people lose their homes and families. We feel like everything that meant important to us has been taken away. We feel that our purpose in life does not exist anymore. And however, during that time that this period is haunting you, you don't realize, but actually you're learning how to handle that situation and make it better, which is making you kind of mentally and physically stronger. This is known as the hard-hitting process of accepting what has happened. Secondly, you start to formulate a plan. This plan is basically like a situation or like a formula how to prevent the next situation from happening. Therefore, considerably making you more wise and alert. To an extent, you can cheat the storm the next time it takes place. And for me, any storm that's happened in my life, I see them as a blessing in disguise because it helped in the transformation of me. I know acceptance is something not many of us like to agree because we like to take the easy technique out and pretend that the situation never happened in the first place, which led to the damaging turmoil of events. And due to our selfish behavior, we rather choose the wrong answer because it seems more appealing than the right one. Why? Because we want justice. We want to feel good and right about ourselves. But feeding off someone else's faults and anxiety is not going to make it any better. Your mind is just becoming mentally frailer. Why not be the bigger person and just accept and just move on? And lastly, is do what makes you happy. Follow your desire. You know, as time flew by, I felt more obligated to what other people did. I always used to base my intuition on what other people did and what made them happy. Try not to base your happiness on anyone else. And if you're like me, try not to be a constant people pleaser either. You think you're doing them a favor when you're actually not. You're making it easier for them to take advantage of you. At the end of the day, your highest level of achievement you can have is happiness. It is how you measure the good things. Happiness is what you interpret in front of you. Because when it all comes down to it, it's how you're willing to live your life even if you have the slightest imperfections. Here's a keepsake. Your happiness does not lay in anyone else's pocket but your own. Thank you.